Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Price, and I'm here again with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here.
So nice to have you once more. So in this episode, this is a celebratory episode. This is our 75th podcast episode.
Yes.
Who knew we would get this far?
Happy 75th.
Happy 75th, because in those darker days in the beginning,
Yes.
It was just one step at a time.
One step at a time.
Suddenly,
and now it's almost like a snowball. We're
getting to 75 episodes. And
it's amazing.
so what we normally do on our major episodes, which are the 25 marks, the 0, 20, 25, 50, and 75, and of course on 100 and whatnot, we do Q&A. So these are listeners' questions, and you're sending in your questions to us, and we're going to be answering a few questions from some of our stalwart listeners, and hopefully we'll be able to help you with what we're saying, and we get a bit of an understanding of where you are with your astrology learning, because most of our audience are, I like to call them aspiring astrologers.
Yeah.
They know a little bit, they've got their chart, and they're just trying to get a grasp on the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we haven't gotten to your question yet, we may be saving it to do an entire episode about your questions. Some of them were very inspiring,
Yes.
Like we'll get into that later. But you've absolutely inspired us. So thank you for your wonderful questions, because they have definitely lit a fire this time, especially. And if we didn't answer your questions yet, we will definitely be answering them in the future in one way or another.
That's right. So if it was just a general question, we'll probably put it in one of our Q&A sessions.
Yeah.
But if it's a really juicy question, we'll actually do an episode.
Totally.
I think that's brilliant, Owen. Yeah.
So our first question comes from our listener named Sarah. She says, I was reading about the part of fortune on the Starzology website. Thank you. And you also mentioned the part of marriage. How do you find that?
Yes, so this is an interesting question, because we'll start off learning about the part of fortune because all of the astrology programs will pop it in for you.
Yeah.
So you can think, well, let's have that as well, and you throw it on in. And in time, you get to understand where the calculation comes from. So these parts are calculated. They're not just random positions within a chart.
Yeah, and they're not planets. They're not
No.
weird little rocks or asteroids or anything. They're mathematical points.
They're points out there. And they were based, they used to be called the Greek lots or the Arabic parts, and there are a myriad of them, myriad of parts. And Sarah's question is about the part of marriage.
Yeah.
Now, this is a position within a chart where it will be different for everybody. And when you have that is a sensitive point for you, anyone who's triggering that part is likely to be around at points when you're actually getting married.
Mm. And how would it be a sensitive point? What would make it a sensitive point in your chart? Would that be by transit, or if it's conjunct to something else?
So it might be conjunct one of your planets, or it might, if you've got a romantic partner, they may conjoin your part of marriage bang on. Mm. Alternatively, by transit, you may find you've got, I don't know, Jupiter swinging by your part of marriage at the time you get married, because people still do get married, but most people probably only get married once, twice, or maybe 3 times. Mm-hmm. So it's not something we're going to be tapping into all the time. Yeah. But when I'm doing relationship work, when I've got him and her, I'm always looking for the part of marriage in those charts. In the normal course of events, I wouldn't even go there. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing the love and romance questions, you need to find the part of marriage within a chart. Mm-hmm. So this is where you get your thinking caps on, folks. So I'm going to give you the formula, and then I'm going to explain the easy way to do this.
Yes.
So the actual formula to find the part of marriage is a one-off calculation. And what you do is you take your ascendant position, you add it to the descendant position, and then you minus the Venus position.
Oh, interesting.
So say you've got your ascendant at, I've got an example here. Say you've got your ascendant at 10 degrees Gemini. Mm-hmm. Therefore, your descendant would be at 10 degrees Sagittarius. And say, for instance, your Venus is at 25 Cancer. Mm-hmm. What we're going to do is actually back calculate all of these degrees to 0 Aries, and we'll get a number up to 360. So we can do the maths on these numbers. So if your ascendant is at 10 degrees Gemini, you're going to add 10 degrees for the Gemini and then 60 degrees from Aries and Taurus. So you add it so that then your number there would be 70 for the ascendant.
Right.
I know you're saying right and following along. I love it.
I totally am.
For the descendant at 10 degrees Sagittarius, you've got the 10 degrees for the Sagittarius. Then you're adding 240 degrees because that is the position that Sagittarius starts from 0 Aries. So your answer for your descendant is 250. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then if you've got Venus at 25 Cancer, you add the two. You've got your Venus at 25 Cancer, that's 25. And then you would add 90 because Cancer starts 90 degrees from 0 Aries.
Right.
This gives us a total for Venus of 115 degrees.
Yeah.
So we've converted all of these three positions, the ascendant, the descendant, and Venus, all the way onto the 360 count.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes sense.
So basically what we're going to do then is we're going to say 70 plus 250 minus 115, and the answer happens to be 205. Mm-hmm. You then take away the actual sign that is the largest, but not beyond the 205, which is Libra at 180. Mm. So you minus 180, and you end up with a part of marriage at 25 Libra. Mm. Didn't that sound easy? Okay, so yes, you might want to listen to all that again. I'm going to put this calculation on the blog post that goes with it so you can follow along with what I'm doing.
Or just appreciate that this is how astrologers used to have to do it.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
This is
Take a moment and let that sink in, folks.
You basically do, unless you've got solar fire, which will give you the part of marriage and all the other parts of divorce, death, and all the rest of it.
Or astro.com. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
Well, who goes there? But
Ooh, indeed.
But the point is that, so you've got this sensitive point of the part of marriage within your chart. Now, we all have it.
Yeah.
So having gone through the pain of understanding where it all came from, let me give you the shortcut.
Yes. Please.
Okay. So to find the part of marriage, you're going to look at the chart, and your horizontal line between the ascendant and the descendant remains horizontal.
Yeah.
You would then find where is Venus, and it's either be above the line or below the line. Mm-hmm. Now, if Venus is above the line, so will your part of marriage be. Mm-hmm. And if Venus is below the line, so will your part of marriage be. And your part of marriage is as far that Venus is from either the descendant or the ascendant on the other side of the chart. Oh. So you can draw a horizontal line from your Venus parallel to the ascendant-descendant and eyeball, if you have to, where the part of marriage would go.
Interesting.
So
I want to go look and see if I can figure it out.
Arwynne, let's have a quick eyeball at your part of marriage.
Is this a pop quiz?
Is this a pop quiz?
This is a pop quiz for sure. Okay.
So this is one that when you technically, if you want the exact position, you have to do the maths, but you can definitely eyeball it as well. So you've got an ascendant-descendant line.
Yes, 2 degrees Scorpio.
Going across, and it's going. So where's your Venus? Is it above?
Above.
So it's above.
Yes.
And how far above is it? Is it above the ascendant or the descendant?
It is above the ascendant. It's
okay.
In the 11th house.
In the 11th house. So if you drew a parallel line, parallel to the ascendant-descendant, which sign would it end up being in? Okay, so Arwynne, if we're just going to have a quick squiz at your chart. So we've got the ascendant-descendant line, and we see that Venus is above the ascendant. So we know the part of fortune is going to be above the descendant, and we would just run a line parallel to the ascendant-descendant, that number of degrees. So if we just run it across, we can see it's going to be in Taurus, and then you would just nail the exact position there, probably 20-something Taurus.
Yeah.
But you can eyeball it across there.
Nice.
If you're that particular, you actually will have to do the calculations, and any good astrology will. If you're doing an astrology exam, you better know how to do this calculation.
Yeah.
You know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
But you can definitely eyeball it. And not only that, say you've got this boyfriend and you think, ooh, is he the one? Ooh, you look at his chart and see where his part of marriage is and see do you have any planets on that point? Which will always be a good indicator that maybe this is going to be some kind of marriage connection here.
Amazing.
At that time, yeah. Or transits too. When transits go through Taurus, it will be triggering your part of marriage there as well.
Nice.
So that's interesting. You don't have any planets there, but maybe your man does at some point. Not that you're married, but I mean, it's but that's what the question is.
Right.
When would you tie the knot?
Right.
Any thoughts on that, Arwynne?
Well, I mean, I'm glad there's an easy way to figure.
I know. when I teach this class and they're saying, oh yeah, I want to know about love and romance, teach me about this and that, how do I interpret it? And I'm saying, okay, let's start with this one. And you got this blank look and I'm saying, and I'm going to say all that again. And eventually it clicks.
Yeah.
It's just, you're thinking, what's she talking about? But you've got to be able to add 2 and 2 together. So yeah, there is a bit of maths for this.
Yeah.
But there is certainly an easy way to do it, which is always great.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm hoping that's answered Sarah's questions. She can now eyeball her chart, find the horizontal that Venus is going to make, and that will be the answer. Now, of course, if Venus is actually square the ascendant descendant, the part of marriage is where Venus is, and that's like a double whammy.
Right. That would make it very easy.
Yeah, so anytime you've got Venus square the ascendant, it's you just know. You just know I want to get married. Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question. Yeah.
The next question comes from Kendall. And Kendall says, what is the difference between Campanus and Placidus houses? And specifically, what is the difference between time versus space in a division of the chart in terms of the house systems and the metaphysics of the different house systems?
Okay, this is a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question.
It is a big question. So let's go back to basics, that there are multiple types of house systems.
Yeah.
So and in general, let's say we're using Placidus, and there are other ones, like she's asking about Campanus, and there's equal house and porphyry and what have you.
Yeah.
But basically, there are 2 different ways of calculating house systems. One is that from the ascendant to the midheaven, it's time-based. So from when the sun rises, and then they count 2 hours later, and then they mark. Yeah. This is Placidus. They mark the degree, and then 2 hours later, they mark the degree, and then 2 hours later, they mark the degree. That's Placidus. That's why there's different divisions, because of the shape of the Earth and how far are you from the equator. Right. If we all lived on the equator, there'd be no need for house systems.
Right. And that's why when you are born near the equator, your houses in the Placidus system are much more equal.
Yes.
And then if you were born far, far north or far, far south, you tend to have very, very skewed houses.
Exactly. And
some of them are
and it's to do with times. That's measuring by time. Right. And there are several house systems that work with time. One is not equal house, porphyry as well, which was one when I was training. We had to use porphyry houses for a month, which was quite a challenge. So that method is that you take the difference between the ascendant and the midheaven, and you divide it equally into 3 mathematically. Yeah. So that would be a porphyry house system. So you're going to still have your 3 houses the same width, and then the other 3 houses the same width in porphyry. He had a theory. That's his theory. Those are porphyry houses. We don't use them. Yeah. But then Campanus is actually a space system where it's not measuring the ascendant on time. They're measuring the actual distance from the ascendant to the midheaven. This is where all these measurements are being made. Yeah. Now, there are multiple, if you go back in the history of house system evolution, there are multiple house systems. And there's one book I want to recommend, and it's Priscilla Costello's Practical Astrology by Weiser. You can get it on Amazon. And she briefly goes through the evolution of the actual house systems.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's hear some of that.
Pardon?
Oh, I said, let's hear some of that.
Oh, no, I'm not going to quote from that. Oh, okay. I'm also going to recommend The Elements of House Division by Ralph William Holden. These are quite older. Mm-hmm. And then The Astrologer's Astronomical Handbook, Jeff Mayo.
Okay.
So this is the thing. All of these houses are calculated slightly differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason that Placidus is such a common house system.
Yes, so the reason that Placidus is the common house system these days is because they issued Placidus tables of houses. Mm-hmm. Because back in the day when I studied astrology, you needed a table of houses to calculate your house positions. And you could only get Placidus.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
So it's really just...
It's sheer luck that we happen to be working with Placidus. Huh. So, but to me, let me tell you what I think about house systems, is that it's like driving a car. You've got those running on petrol and those running on diesel. Those running on gas and those running on diesel. 85% of astrologers are using Placidus. They're running on gas. Right. 15% are running on diesel and they're doing equal house, Koch, Campanus, Regiomontanus, you name it. There's a house system for it.
They'll still get there.
They still get there. Exactly. This is the point. The vehicle will still get there. The journey will continue. But they're using a different system. Yeah. We just happen to be using Placidus system. It's an old astrology joke. And they say, why do you use Placidus? And the answer is, because my teacher did. Because they taught Placidus and it came down the line. Right. Nowadays, you can tap Astro Gold and it'll give you Campanus, Koch. No, but if you've got to do it by hand, you're not doing it. Yeah. It'll take you 5 days to calculate a chart.
Right. Well, apparently the reason that Kendall asked this question, there's a bit of a preamble before the question in this email that I got, but it was because she had gone to one of these chart calculation sites and just, to get a reading, and it had automatically used Campanus houses.
Yeah.
Which, caused a bit of a crisis because
I bet it did. Horrors.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, no. It's just the way. And these are named after men over time.
Yes.
And what was Campanus's full name? He was the 12th century Renaissance Johannes Campanus, a mathematician for Pope Urban IV. So this is that old.
Right. Well, apparently, according to Wikipedia here, in Campanus houses, the prime vertical, which is the great circle taking in the zenith and east point on the horizon, is divided into 12, and these divisions are projected onto the ecliptic along great circles that take in the north and south points on the horizon. It is attributed to Campanus of Novara, but the method is known to have been used before his time. Apparently.
Yes, because he's using the zenith and the nadir, which are different to the midheaven and the IC.
Right.
That's the point.
Because they're space versus time.
Well, there are different positions on a chart. Yeah, you can display them, but
Yeah.
So my answer is that find something that, if you're just learning astrology, I'm going to say stick with Placidus because that's what everybody's using, until you got to a point where you can run your chart through these different house systems and then decide, do I like Pluto in the second house or do I like it in the third house? And you're going to know and find something that's going to work for you.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, I mean, that's why I don't use another house system, because first of all, I'm used to, Placidus, but when I was first starting out in astrology, as a student of,
as a rookie.
As a self-taught student, I tried out a couple of different house systems and they immediately put weird placements in my chart that I was absolutely not cool with.
That's right.
Yeah.
Whereas if you train with the faculty in London, they only use equal house because they want to train solidly, and then you get the option to. And it's like, it's like when you're driving a car, right? Yeah. You start off learning how to drive, and you're hanging on for dear life, and you think, "Can I stand
at 10 to 2?"
Yeah, and you're hanging on for dear life, and this and that, and you just want to get from A to B.
Yeah.
And then. So that's us doing our Placidus houses. Yeah. But then when you actually can drive, you think, well, I'm just going to speed down here. To hell with that. I'm going to park on the pavement. And you're breaking the rules. And that's what's happening when you go into different house systems.
Yeah.
And why not? It's your choice.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to use Placidus.
Right.
But if you're one of my students, you will have to. Because I just can't be bothered having the argument all the time about it.
Yeah.
It's your choice if you want to use it. You're still going to get to an end result.
Yeah. And if you want to be a rebel and you want to have sort of your own style and you've learned about all the different house systems, and I would actually recommend this Wikipedia article, or, I'm sure that there's an astrology site that goes into it in,
Well, I'll link to that Wikipedia
But
page.
if you just want the, absolute plain language, and it's not, I know a lot of Wikipedia can be very anti-astrology, just.
Really?
Oh, God. Yeah, but this article is not. This article, aside from just the warnings about attributions and all that stuff, which is kind of commonplace, it does actually give a lot of really good history, and it does give you a very interesting table where it actually shows you all the house systems and what they have in common and what they have not in common.
There you go.
Like where the first house cusp is, where the 10th house cusp is, if those are the same as the ascendant and the descendant, which they're not always, and what defines the division of the houses, whether it's equal sectors or whether it's because of the
time.
Yeah, exactly.
This is it. And if you are an ambitious aspiring astrologer, invent your own house system, because we are waiting for it.
For sure, yeah.
And this is what's happened over history.
Absolutely. All these men who, Morinus and Regiomontanus.
That's always in a crossword. If you're doing an astrology crossword, Regiomontanus is one of the words.
Exactly. Usually diagonal, probably. Porphyry, Meridian, all of these different ones. So learn about them and try your chart in all of the different house systems. And
please do.
If you find a favorite, then...
Yeah. This is one of those questions that is constantly debated by astrologers, house systems along with orbs and things like that. So, no, it's a good question. And, it's up to you, I would say.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Kendall. Next up, we have a question from Bo, who you may recall from previous episodes.
Yes.
Bo is a special guest and friend of the podcast. So he says, every sign shares rulership with a traditional planet except for Cancer and Leo. That makes them feel chosen or special. Why were these signs assigned luminaries as their partners? Conversely, why do Capricorn and Aquarius share Saturn? The signs seem so different, Capricorn and Aquarius, and they certainly do. And he says, I know the answer is probably relating to the proximity of the planets, and Saturn is slow, so it takes its time going through the signs during that season, but it just bugs me. Ha ha ha.
Well, let's get rid of the bug, shall we? Let's get the bug out.
Great
get
question.
The burr out the saddle.
Absolutely. And that's more like 2 questions, but let's do it.
Okay.
These are great.
So what he's actually asking is, why do certain planets rule certain signs?
Yeah.
And where's the logic?
And is there something special about Cancer and Leo because they're ruled by the luminaries?
Absolutely. So there is. So way back in the day, of 2,000 years ago, when the Greeks were doing their astrology and the Arabs and all the rest of it, they came up with it.
And all that. Yeah.
So because astrology was evolved in the Northern Hemisphere, they're very concerned with summer. Because summer was a time when all the crops were in the field in spring, all the lambs had been born, and summer was a time when you could take your summer holiday, basically, because the harvest only began at Virgo. So when the sun was in Leo, it was a time to kick back, lie in the fields, and frolic with your lady, I suppose.
Eat fruit and have someone feed you grapes as you're laying back in a toga.
Exactly. Yeah. So this was the most pleasant, warmest time of the year when the sun was in Leo, and that is why the sun has been given rulership of Leo, because it's the time of the year.
Amazing.
Yes. Now, that means that from the cusp of where the cusp between Cancer and Leo, this is where we're going to make more measurements from. So bear that in mind in a moment.
Yeah.
So the idea is that the hottest time of the year, the most glorious time of any year, is actually when the sun is in Leo.
I can't argue with that.
If you're in the north, so it was given to the sun.
If you're in the northern hemisphere, yeah.
Yes, and then the next best time of the year is the month before that, the month prior, which is Cancer, and that was given to, of course, the night light to the moon, because they are both dominant and at the same size as each other. One's the day, one's the night.
And as we know from those mythological traditions, the moon is traditionally, it's like the partner, the wife, the wife of the sun.
Exactly, it's male, female, let's face it.
Yeah.
And this is what's happened. So they gave these 2 luminaries to the most important time of the year to celebrate that if the crops were doing well and if the lambs were doing well, all is good with the world.
Yeah.
So let's make the most of the sun.
Yeah.
And then during the Cancer time, this was given to the moon because it was also the second best time of the year, warmth-wise. Yeah. Your crops could be doing well, your lambs could be born by this time, and so on.
Yeah.
But this particular point, the actual point between Cancer and Leo, is where all the next measurements are going to be coming from.
Yeah.
So from this point, they took the next planet out from the sun, which is Mercury, and gave Mercury the rulerships of the 2 signs adjacent.
On either side of it, before and after.
Before and after. So Mercury then rules the positive sign of Gemini and the passive sign of Virgo.
Yeah.
Also note that the aspect from the position of 0 Leo to the beginning of these signs is a semi-sextile.
Yeah.
So that aspect belongs to Mercury. Just side note.
Yeah.
Next planet out is Venus.
Yeah.
So Venus got the next 2 signs. So it got Taurus.
And Libra.
Taurus and Libra.
Yeah.
And the aspect from this position is a sextile. It's the little good aspect.
Right.
Because Venus is the little good planet.
Yeah.
So Venus owns sextiles as well.
Right.
Next up, we've got Mars. So Mars is ruling Aries and Scorpio.
Right. And that's the square.
That's the square. It's the little bad planet.
Yeah.
And that is what Mars is, the little malefic planet.
Yeah.
That is Mars, and it's got a square. So anytime you've got a square, it has the nature of Mars.
Right. Amazing.
Next, we've got Jupiter.
Yeah.
So Jupiter's ruling then Pisces and Sagittarius.
Yeah.
And its aspect is the trine.
Right.
The big good planet gets the big good aspect, which is the trine.
Yeah.
So this is all built in
Jupiter
here.
being the big one.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then the last 2 at the very end, in the coldest cold of the winterous winter, is Aquarius and Capricorn, both ruled by Saturn.
Yeah.
And if you take it where they're meeting together, they are directly opposite this position between Cancer and Leo. So the big difficult aspect is
the opposition,
which is ruled by the big malefic.
And at the time, Saturn was the farthest planet.
It's the last visible planet.
Yeah.
It's all they could see. That's why they laid it out this way.
Amazing.
So this is why you've got your your lesser benefic with its lesser benefic aspect. You've got your greater benefic with its greater benefic aspect, and the same for the malefics as well.
That's incredible. That's a way better answer than I thought we would have.
Oh, really?
I had no idea about all that.
You thought, what, they put the numbers in a hat? Let's pull out. No,
I thought it made sense, but I didn't think it made that much sense.
It absolutely does. And once you get a handle on, and there's a little diagram, I'll probably put it on the on the blog post as well.
That's a really great
explaining this. It's actually, if it's in chapter 3 of my books, and you look at this diagram, and if you're not following along, you don't understand what it's saying.
Yeah.
But this is that it all hinges from when was it a good time?
Yeah.
When can you kick back and
enjoy
relax.
the fruits, literally and figuratively, of your labors.
So this is the basis of it, and this is why his question is that why is it Aquarius and Capricorn? That's the reason, because it's the coldest of the cold.
Yeah.
And
they're farthest from the sun.
Yes, and in opposition, and it's the most difficult planet.
And Saturn at the time was the farthest out.
Yes.
Of course, modern rulerships, that brings a whole wrench into the
Well, this is where the astrologers get a say, right? Because, Uranus
all of a sudden,
yeah. So this is it. So when you get a new planet being discovered, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
1781, 1848,
you've got the numbers.
1930.
There will be a discovery chart for that Uranus discovery, and that will tell you the nature of that planet. That's why it's important.
Yeah.
As we spoke about in the Eris episode as well.
Absolutely. Oh.
That it's astrologers now who are, when we get new planets, are saying, I think this rules this one.
Right. Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question there.
Yeah. Okay, our next question comes from Tony, who says, I cannot get a good handle on the 6th house. And the more I read about it, the less I understand. It is so foreign to me. Yeah.
So the 6th house is a house that has multiple things in it.
Yeah.
I often think it's a particularly boring little house because it's got work in it.
Yeah.
Daily rituals. It's when you're doing the laundry, you're doing the shopping, you're doing your stuff, you're cleaning.
Yeah.
You're taking the dog to the vet.
Yeah.
You're doing your work.
Yeah.
So it's
if that's really foreign to you, then we admire you. You're lucky, but we suspect it's not foreign to anybody really.
Yes. So it's to do with the work you do. It's to do with your health.
Yeah.
And we did speak about this in our Caden episode as well.
Yes. Please go and listen to that one.
Yeah.
If you have questions about these
Link
houses.
to the Caden to the episode as well. Yes.
We went into great detail about it, but we'll go into more detail now.
So when you have planets in the 6th house, if you're going to look about it as your job, it would indicate that you're going to have several different jobs in the nature of those planets. Yeah. If there are no planets there, then you look to the ruler of the 6th house.
Yeah.
And when planets transit the 6th house, you are likely to have to do some work. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, there was very much more of a master-slave relationship that came through the 6th house that we do carry forward now. We don't necessarily have slaves, but we do have people who work for us. You've got the pool guy, if you've got a pool. You've got the guy that comes and mows your lawn. Yeah. These are employees of yours.
The Uber Eats guy.
The Uber Eats guy, exactly.
The barista. Yeah.
All these people who actually work for you are in the 6th house, and you may or may not know them or
Pet
anything.
Groomer. All these things.
Exactly. The dog walker. Yeah. And of course, your pets are in there, right? Cats, dogs, and what have you are all in. So it's all day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
That's in the 6th house.
Yeah, and it's to tie this together, it is the natural house of Virgo. So Virgo is about work and health and the harvest.
Yes.
And the carrying those sheaf of wheat. And
that is the symbol of it.
The labor of and it's funny. I remember when I was doing my astrology calendars before the Badass Goddesses, I had one.
What's their life before that?
The art is questionable. It was not as good. I've gotten better over anyway, it doesn't matter. But I had this one Virgo, which I loved, and it was Virgo in a library, and she had a stack of books in her arms, because I thought, this is the modern Virgo. Very few of us are farmers, statistically speaking.
Yes, we're not
unlike 100 years ago, or
That's right.
For the entirety of human history. That was the biggest division of labor was farming, and now I think that the Virgo is the
it's where you hone
the collector of information, the collector of trivia and knowledge. Maybe not trivia as much as that's a Gemini thing, but it can seem trivial to others as we.
It's the minutiae of life, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. The little
habits, little things, and
the little habits, the little rituals, the little just day-to-day things that you do to make your own life easier or to serve others and to get paid.
Yes.
Or to, keep your pets happy and healthy and alive, because that is a job. Basically, if you have a pet, you are scooping out the litter box or taking it for walks.
You're having to attend. Yeah. And just on a side note, in my relocation chart, most of my planets are in the first and second and third in my natal chart. But when I relocated to Vancouver, all of these planets suddenly ended up in my 6th house.
Oh, no, and you were like, is it too late to not move here?
and I've sort of now got, and that's a relocation chart, admittedly, but I've got 6 planets in that 6th house, and I have to tell you, I've never worked so hard in my life.
Yeah.
And it's multiple things. It's every day. It's 24/7. Whereas 20 years ago, I used to be sitting by the pool and drinking my pina coladas, and going to the hairdresser and things.
Right.
Now it seems to be a constant, the daily grind. And that's really what the 6th house is.
Yeah, the daily grind.
The daily grind, doing what you've got to do to get by, to get through, to, preparing your food the night before, cooking your food, shopping and doing all the chores that need doing, mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
It's 6th house.
And brushing your teeth, the health things.
Yes.
Going for your eye exam or your
It's not a very,
checkup.
as I say, that's why I call it a bit of a boring house, because it's not a fun, exciting house like the 5th house is, where you're in the casino or doing something exotic with feathers.
Being wined and dined.
No, this is where you're actually having to take out the garbage and clean the kitchen sink.
Clean those wine glasses and rinse out the bottles before you recycle them.
Oh, they do that? Okay.
Oh, yeah, some people do. Not me. I just toss them into the recycling willy-nilly.
Do you have some other thoughts on the 6th house?
I do. And, well, actually, they're not my thoughts. They are Stephen Forrest's thoughts.
Okay.
I'm going to quote him from The Inner Sky.
Right.
And this is a great book, as we've quoted liberally before. Mm-hmm. But he says the 6th house, and he's just got a couple of keywords here. It's the house of servants, which we've touched on a bit.
Yeah.
It is the corresponding house of, obviously, Venus, Mercury. It's house of responsibilities, competence and skill, devotion and self-sacrifice. Successfully navigated, this house is about the fulfillment through development of a personally meaningful skill that's of value to others. And unsuccessfully navigated, it's endless busyness at tasks that have no personal meaning, drudgery, and wage slavery.
Isn't that it? Oh. Drudgery.
Yeah. He says humiliatingly subordinate roles in key relationships is one of the downfalls of this house. So that is when you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
In medieval astrology, the 6th house is the house of the servants. Anything you want to know about problems you may face with your stable boys and scullery maids, you can get your answers here. Clearly, in the 20th century and the 21st, this has demanded a fundamental rethinking of the 6th house, which may be why it is so sort of nebulous and hard to understand, because the delineations that we have are maybe a little outdated or they haven't really caught up. So he says, it's now the house of ourselves as the servant, not in a degrading or menial sense, but it's the house where we recognize an elemental human need, the desire to exercise competence and be recognized for it. Fixing a car, playing a violin, doing an effective astrological interpretation. The form of competence, the form that competence takes can vary widely, but if we fail to discover that special skill within ourselves or fail to develop it to its limits, there's emptiness in our lives. Some basic essential is missing. And how do we find that skill? The answer lies in the 6th house.
Yeah.
So it's repetition and the daily rituals and the daily activities, that the 10,000 hours as they say.
10,000 steps a day.
10,000 steps a day, and the 10,000 hours it takes to become an expert at something or whatever that is. And it says, should your navigation of the 6th house be unsuccessful, the need for meaningful responsibilities remains. And now we have nothing to give, no skills, no special competence, and we begin to work for work's sake, slaving away at a patchwork of labors that are irrelevant to us. We become a wage slave or the drudge, praying for the weekend. And soon we find ourselves living in a world populated with bosses. We lack the inner direction of our labors. Outer direction quickly takes up the slack, and soon our confidence in our own decision-making collapses. So that I'm sure sounds familiar and cringy to a lot of people.
Yeah.
He says more is corrupted than our professional life in that case. And as our respect for our own competence dwindles, our relationships, our friendships, our loves, and our friendships are all tainted. We lose faith in ourselves, and everywhere we go seems to be begging for someone to make us an assignment, and they do. And if we fill it, we may seethe with resentment at the endless blithering of insignificant hassles which our life has become reduced to.
Yes.
So,
this is it. Don't they say that if you don't make your future, someone will do it for you?
That's exactly right. And that's the 6th house.
Yeah. And I think Karl Marx spoke about that man is here, well, man and woman, we are here to work is part of who we are. And we need to be able to hone our craft on something.
Yeah.
Not everything, but definitely you've got to be able to do something.
Yeah, it's like the last, one of my favorite bloggers from back in the day used to say, about power. The last psychiatrist was, I'm quoting here, he says, power, you're not, no one's going to give you power. They're not going to, that's not how power works. You have to take it.
Yeah.
And this is about the 6th house. You either are going to, rule your own destiny and your own day-to-day life and reap the rewards from it, or you're going to be in service to someone else.
Yeah.
And frequently it's not just going to be one or the other. There's a balance. You will have to continue to scoop up after your pet regardless if you choose to have a pet, but you can choose to think of that as your, keeping your pet alive and healthy and happy to, enrich your life, or, you're just picking up after this dominating little force and you're a slave.
And I think anytime if you've got a job where you're watching the clock because you can't wait to get out of there, that is definitely 6th house, where you are there at the behest of somebody else and it's really not what you wanted to be doing. But until you come up with something that you'd rather do better or develop it into something else creatively, I would assume, you will still be working for the man.
Yeah.
And
and which is not to say that you can't then be happy. Yeah. Because
most people have a job.
Yeah. And you can find absolutely rewarding things about any job. You can, and then you can be freed.
Find your place.
Yeah. Be freed at 5 p.m. or midnight or whenever you're off work and your life is your own. And
weekend warriors. Eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's the 6th house.
That's the 6th house.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. And for our last question today, Darshita asks, I'm just starting out learning about astrology, and I feel totally overwhelmed by all of the squares, conjunctions, etc. How can I grasp the concept of astrology in a nutshell, or at least bite off something that I can chew?
Yeah.
I have sympathy for this question.
It is a question because this is someone who's obviously starting to learn astrology and they think, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. And suddenly it's not, because there is so much coming at you at once.
Yeah.
You have to know so much to get to a certain level with astrology. Your 4 cornerstones, signs, planets, houses, and aspects, before you can actually even interpret a chart.
Yeah. And you have all the information in the world at your fingertips.
Yes, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So what you need to tighten things up.
Yeah.
I created this, just by the way, fun bingo guide, which is there's a page for beginners guide to astrology. And there are 24 items on this list, on this bingo sheet, that you need to master to know how to read a basic chart. Yeah. And don't even move on to the more advanced topics, of which I've got bingo sheets as well, before you know how to do these things.
Yeah, so you've got a basic beginner one,
what you need
then
to
an
do.
Intermediate one, and then an advanced one.
Yes.
You've got 3 different sheets in front of you. And
4, actually. Yeah.
4, amazing. And they're colorful and exciting, and I want to play bingo right now.
Yeah, so if you want to, this will be on the website. You'll be able to pick it up on the, I'll put the link in the podcast. Yeah. It's not actually there as we speak, but the idea is that you can download this PDF and start working on these things.
Yeah.
So
print it out and
work on it. So should I just go through a few of these items on the beginners? Because this was a question about the beginners.
Yeah.
So I'll just go through these, and you can just.
I'll pretend that I'm.
Okay. So it's random. I thought I was going to have some kind of pattern, but I didn't. It's all full color, but
because we need the bingo numbers.
Exactly. So the idea with bingo is that it's a grid, and there's 24 things you have to complete to get the bingo and say, I can do beginners.
Yeah.
So they're all. I'm just going to read them as they're flowing, but you would do them in any order that suits you, because when you get this, you might say, "Oh, I know that," and you can cross it off. Then you can concentrate on the next step.
Yeah, just make a game of it. I mean, you could either go through them in order, or you could throw a dice, and the dice would land on one, and you'd answer that one. That's a fun one.
Clearly, we need to do another episode on this. All right.
Gamify it.
Yeah, gamify it. So I'm just going to read through these 24 options that are on here, and we'll just have a chat. So my very, very first square says, draw your birth chart.
Ah.
I know. So what this means is, if you've got an app and it says, oh, there's your birth chart, that's not good enough. Yeah. You've got to draw it. Get your compass out, draw it on a page by hand, and learn this birth chart.
Or get a side plate and draw a circle.
Yes. Well, yeah. You've got to be able to draw because then you're imbuing from your hand to your brain,
from your hand, exactly.
and you say, oh, there's Mercury. I see how to draw that.
Yeah.
And this is how you learn things.
That's absolutely true. And it's interesting because there is something about just absolutely, and of course I went to art school, and we're both artists, but even if you have never drawn anything in your life, there is something about just transcribing something that makes it go from your brain through your hand. Hunter S. Thompson said that when he was first learning to write, he actually retyped a couple of works from Hemingway. Mm-hmm. He retyped the entire novel himself, looking at it and typing it, just so he would know what it was like to have a work of genius flow through his hands into the typewriter. And this is back in the day when there were no computers. This was typewriter. So
this is it. So you need to be able to draw your chart. And if you're a student of mine, I will ask you after the third lesson on a blank piece of paper, draw your chart from memory, because you've got to know your chart.
Yeah.
And if you can't do it, you're fumbling, thinking, why don't you know what your ascendant is? Why don't you know which house the sun is in? This is how you learn.
Yeah.
You cannot just look digitally and say, oh, I've got this chart on whatever you've got, Astro Gold, or what's that new one? Cosmo something or other. Something. Anyway. Co-star. Oh, there's my chart. Boom.
Right.
No. Draw it out.
Yeah.
So one of the other squares on here that's not in order, which I'm just going to tell you it, and it says, set up your astrology journal, 1 page for each topic. So I encourage all my students to get themselves a journal, A5 journal, and set it up and say, my astrology journal, and you're going to put a title on every page, the sun, the moon, the Venus, blah, 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 first house, second house, so on. You brought the whole thing down because you're going to learn it all eventually. And you can put your chart in the front page and say, this is where you're going to draw your chart in your astrology journal. If you're not writing notes, you're not going to learn astrology.
Interesting.
That's kind of one of the things. So that's a pretty easy one that you can do too. You can pop out and get a journal, draw your chart, and you can mark off 2 charts on our bingo.
And I was never a student of yours, but I did this actually about 20 years ago when I was starting to learn astrology again. I, of course, learned it, with my mother and grandmother when I was a child. But when I was just starting actually to read books and do all this self-study, I had a journal and I would write, impressions of Cancer, impressions of Leo. And then I would write just sort of a free-form stream of consciousness thing of like all the friends I had who were Leos. What did they all have in common? What were some interesting just observations about the sign of Leo? Like, it's in the summer, it's the sun, all this,
This is it.
Sort of sensory impressions that I didn't read anywhere, but that were coming to me. And that might be a way of
learning too. Yeah. So you'd have a page that says Leo, and you put all your comments in there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So this is what the benefit of the journal is, and it's small enough you can take it with you.
Yeah.
And once more, you're becoming analog. You're getting off the digital because you cannot learn when you've just got a chart on your phone. Forget it.
Yeah, it's just reading is great, but actually writing notes that are from your own mind and from your own observations.
Your interpretations, because that's the sort of I agree. Yeah. All right. So the next topic that we have, and these are just randomized because I'm just reading them straight off. It's going to be saying, write 3 keywords for the fire signs. So that's Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and you have to come up with 3 keywords from all your research and books that you happen to have at the moment, and put them in your journal.
Nice.
So you could write 3 fire sign ones.
Absolutely, that's awesome.
The next square says, list all your trines and sextiles, the soft aspects.
Nice.
So you're going to pull all your trines and sextiles out of your chart and list them. Trines, sextiles. These are the soft aspects. Yeah. That's
for that, I would think you could probably look at your actual chart, but just writing them down in a list, not from memory necessarily.
Oh, yeah, no, but you put them in your journal.
Yeah, in your journal, because then they're all in one thing in the list.
That's right.
Yeah.
The next square says, find your chart rulers. Mm-hmm. Can you name your chart rulers? Maybe you can, but that's something you need to know how to do. The next one says, write 3 keywords about your ascendant.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be on your ascendant page. Moving on, write 3 keywords about the succeedent houses. That's the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th. And you can always refer to Arwynne's and our podcast for some keywords there.
Yes, those were great episodes.
Yeah. Next thing is note your lunar phase. Do you know what your lunar phase is?
When you were born. Yeah.
Yeah, in your natal chart.
Balsamic or full moon or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Write 3 keywords for the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars.
For yours specifically, or for just...
No, for the planets.
Yeah, Mars.
You're trying to learn astrology.
Yeah.
List your retrograde planets. Can you find them by looking at them? You've got to know where they are.
Right.
Then I've got write 3 keywords for the luminaries. That's the sun and the moon.
Yeah.
List all your squares and oppositions, the hard aspects.
Yeah.
List them together. They're separate to the soft ones.
Yeah.
Write 3 keywords for your lunar nodes, north and south node. Then write 3 keywords for the earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. List all your conjunctions, because they are much stronger than soft or hard. Conjunctions are very dynamic, and you need to list those and focus on that.
Yeah.
That's the astrology journal. Then write 3 keywords for the succeedent houses, which is 3, 6, 9, and 12.
Yeah.
Write 3 keywords for the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Get them on your journal.
Yeah.
Then, here's one. List all of your aspects by the tightest orb out. So your tightest orb should be 0 degrees, 0 minutes. If you've got any planets like that, they all go on the list first. Then you might have something at 0 degrees, 10 minutes. That's your tightest aspect. And you list them by tightness, because that's how you need to learn them and interpret them, because the tighter they are, the more dynamic they will be.
Definitely.
List 3 keywords for the angular houses, 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. 3 keywords there. Then 3 keywords for your social planets, which is Jupiter and Saturn. And then 3 keywords for the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. 3 keywords on the midheaven. List any unaspected planets. Yeah. If you've got an unaspected planet, you've got to say, hey, it's unaspected. And write 3 keywords for each of the water signs.
Nice.
So these are the 24 things that you need to do. And if you're a beginner astrology, such as our question lady was, you may be able to immediately mark some of these things off, because maybe you know your lunar phase, maybe you know which is retrograde, maybe you know what your conjunctions are, and you cross them off. Then you move on to the next things to learn a little bit, 3 keywords about everything.
Yeah.
You don't need to have reams and reams of stuff.
No.
3 keywords for
3 keywords
Venus.
for each of these things.
Yeah. So this is it. So this is
until you've actually filled out your beginner bingo card,
yes.
Don't even think about the other stuff.
No.
Don't even worry about electional astrology or composite charts or the.
I can go through some of the advanced topics if you want, but I mean,
just throw out. I'm reading them upside down here.
I'll throw out some of the random ones. Yeah. So on the advanced bingo, so this is advanced natal. This is beginner's natal and advanced natal. We're still not doing transits.
Yes.
So first up, we've got the draw your dispositor tree. Oh. Should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Find your strongest quadrant and interpret it. List all your major aspect patterns and interpret.
Yeah.
Find your strongest triple division.
I don't even know what that is.
There you go. Find your solar prenatal eclipse and interpret. Find your most elevated and all of the essential dignities. Lay out your journal with the margin and body for the interpretations and all the complexes, sun complex, moon complex, and so on. Find the Almutin and interpret. These are all things that are advanced natal readings. Right. You don't need to know them when you start. You need to stick with the basic stuff first. The 4 cornerstones. Yeah. Signs, planets, houses, and aspects.
Yeah. And major aspects. Don't even worry about the biquintiles yet.
No, don't go there. Only Ptolemaic. Yeah. That's what it says on here. Only Ptolemaic.
Only Ptolemaic?
Yeah.
Ptolemaic.
So her
Ptolemaic.
Yeah.
Make sure you know what that means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So her question was, how do you start with aspects or,
it was basically just, I feel overwhelmed.
Yes.
Between all the squares, conjunctions, blah, blah, blah. How do I grasp the concepts of astrology in a nutshell? Because I'm biting off more than I can chew.
Exactly. And so this is it. Until you can do these 24 things, you really can't read a natal chart. And I'm sorry to say, you might think you can. And I have people say, I've been doing astrology for 20 years. And they still can't read a chart because they haven't got basics. They've got gaps. Don't have gaps.
Yeah.
do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
Learn what you need to know.
Yeah. Amazing.
If you want to get a copy of the Starzology Astro Bingo Fun Guide, it's a PDF download. It's on the website, and I think it will be under the page search for bingo, and it will pop up there, and then you can download your own PDF copy so that you can see where you are. And even if you're a better astrologer, you might say, oh, yes, I know 90% of this and 50% of that, and I know half of this.
Yeah.
And then I've also got one on forecasting. You know, do you know which lifetime age transit you're in? You've got to know these things.
Yeah.
And you may find that this will show you where your gaps are, which I think is a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. You know? And I mean, we're all for gamification because
yes, why not?
Why not? And this could be a great conversation starter if you're having like a little astrology themed party or get together with people, with friends. You could have this out and it would be a little conversation starter. You could have them lying around on the table.
It should make cards. It should be Trivial Pursuit. Eh?
Right, exactly.
Imagine.
And you could just kind of like randomly like close your eyes and point to one and then ask each other questions.
Yes.
Get to know each other through the basics.
Maybe you can do this.
Of your chart.
Yeah. I mean, I've got one here. I've got the one on the relationship one, and it's one that for an episode we just spoke with, the further question we had about the part of marriage. Calculate the part of marriage because you need to. It's part of relationship astrology.
Yeah.
So it's on the bingo.
I would think on the advanced one. Yeah. Oh, it's on the
relationship one.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's beginner's natal, advanced natal, and then forecasting, and all the transits and whatnot are here, and then romance because that's the question you're always getting.
So there's four different ones.
Actually.
There's four. Download and print, but really just focus on the beginner one.
See where you are. You know, you might know some advanced things. Maybe you do know, you know.
But don't jump around. Just graduate from the beginner and then move on.
This will help people who are struggling with overwhelm to focus on this, forget the rest, just focus on this.
Yeah.
So that was my theory. That was my idea for creating this to start with, to help people. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the question.
Okay, so thanks so much for joining us for our 75th episode. We did some Q&A here with questions from our listeners, which was absolutely great. And we're so happy to be able to help with some ideas and understand where you're coming from with your questions.
Absolutely.
If you found value in this episode, please consider forwarding it to somebody who may be interested. If you have any further questions, you can email us at starzology@gmail.com, and our website is starzology.com. So thank you so much, Arwynne, for joining me again on our podcast 75.
Happy 75.
75 episodes. It is truly a milestone for us. Thank you so much for being there with me.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And thanks, Alison.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer or someone who's learning astrology or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.